Hello everybody, welcome to my website, christopdelsol.com. In this video, I will attempt to demystify web hosting. I will start with a brief introduction of the internet. So what is the internet? The internet is made of servers, they're kind of like your PC at home, that have hardware and software on top of it. And all these machines communicate between each other using protocols. Like to see my website, you're most likely using the HTTP protocol, which is when you surf the web. To send and receive email, you will be using the SMTP POP3 protocol. So it's basically a bunch of machines running software that communicate between each other using protocols. So how do you find things on the web? Every site pretty much has an IP address. Think of an IP address like your street address, your zip code, your town, your state. It's a number. It's really a series of 4 numbers separated by dots that identify a unique website. Or your unique machine at home right now is using a unique IP address to say where you are at. So we don't have to remember these numbers. We map names, easy to remember domain names, to these IPs. That's called the DNS resolution process. And pretty much when you go to google.com, you end up on the Google page. Well, it's really an IP somewhere on a server on the web. Why do you need hosting? As a marketer, you will need, you might get away without hosting for a little while, or when you begin especially. But at one point, you will see the benefits of having a website. So when you have a website, you will need to host that somewhere. You will need to put your website on the internet so other people can see it. So your website will be on a server, it will have an IP address, and anybody can go there and see it. You need hosting for a website and email. What is internet hosting? What is web hosting? It's basically a piece of the internet. You can think of it as your condo or your house or whatever, depending on the size, your mansion on the internet. It's basically a slice of a server, hardware and software and network that you have on the internet that anybody can come and see. What are the different types of hosting? You have basically 3 types of hosting, plus a 4th that is kind of new. They're the shared hosting, which is pretty much a server that is divided into 100 or sometimes even thousands of pieces, and every customer has a little piece of that. Usually on a shared hosting account, they're pretty cheap. The hosting companies usually put 100 or thousands of customers on it, so it's pretty risky because one customer can impact the entire server. But when you start, it could be a good solution. The next one up would be VPS, Virtual Private Server. On a virtual private server, they divide a server into, between 4 and 20, and the separation are a lot stronger. Very hard for one customer to bring down the entire server, although possible. And then you have the dedicated server, which is one server for you and your site, or you and your multiple sites. And then the new way is the cloud hosting, which is pretty much any combination of this with one more layer of virtualization, where it's not attached to one machine, but multiple machines can provide shared VPS or dedicated. So you have one more layer of virtualization to separate the software from the hardware. In the cloud, typically if one server goes down, it doesn't impact you that much because it's still running on the other servers. Where here, a hardware failure can impact you until the hardware failure is solved. Basically here are the choice between shared. So a shared is $3, $4 a month, maybe $10 a month, $20 a month max. VPS solutions are typically more for non-critical things because a high-end VPS can cost as much as a dedicated. So you might as well go for a dedicated. And then you have dedicated if you want no risk from other neighbors, risky neighbors. You get a dedicated server and you won't have that risk. The only thing that can happen to you is a network issue with your provider or a hardware failure. In that case, they just change the hardware and you're back up and running. The graph here shows that the more money you spend, the less risk you have. The less money you spend, the more risk you have. On a shared hosting account, which is fine for 99% of the sites out there, you have more risk. If you have a website that's making $20,000 a month, and around Christmas, developer Bob decides to do some PHP, and he's a beginner and does some errors in his coding, it could potentially impact the full server. And it might take the hosting company a couple of weeks to figure that out, to figure out who is doing that problem, creating that problem. And meanwhile, your site is impacted around Christmas, and you might be losing a lot of money every day. So if your site is making a lot of money, you definitely want to be on dedicated. The more money your site makes, the more you want to spend on your hosting. So what are the selection criteria you have? On shared hosting, it'll be disk space, the amount of space for your website, and the network traffic you can use every month. Typically, you don't have to worry about that. When you're beginning, most programs will be plenty enough for your disk space and your bandwidth. When you get into a dedicated server, your choice, your parameters will be the amount of RAM, the amount of memory, the power of your CPU, the power of the server, the number of instructions it can execute per second, the disk configuration. Another criteria for selecting your hosting provider will be the features. So PHP, MySQL, whatever specificity of your website, if you have some, you want to validate those against the hosting provider. Most of them will support WordPress, Drupal. You might want to check, but usually they will list that. One thing I always like is using a standard control panel. My favorite is cPanel. So wherever I go, whatever company I deal with, if they use cPanel, it's the same interface to manage my account. So I don't have to learn their own interface. So another important criteria to select a hosting provider, I would say maybe the most important, is recommendations. Do you have a friend? Do you know somebody? For example, me, if I recommend a company that I use, is way more valuable than an advertisement you might see on TV or their own website where they're going to, of course, tout how great they are. One thing that I wanted to touch on briefly here, most times when you'll see managed server, it's managed to a certain extent. You still will need a webmaster or yourself to upgrade your WordPress website or your Drupal website. Here are some final tips. If you see a company that's not competent or you have to deal with the employee that's not competent in that company, don't waste your time. Get a different employee or move. That's as simple as that. Plenty of good companies out there, plenty of people who are helpful out there. The other thing I wanted to point out is problems do happen. It doesn't mean it's a bad company. You might have experienced hardware problems on your PC, while a hosting company runs hundreds, if not thousands of PCs. So problems do happen. It's how they handle the problem that makes a difference. If the company doesn't really care about it, if they take forever, if they don't realize how critical it is, you need to move on. That's why it's important, once you become a professional affiliate, to nearly always have some stuff hanging around there that you barely use. A dedicated server you're playing with, you're experimenting with. So if something happens, you can move out of there quick. I hope this helps in your understanding of hosting. Till next time, take care. Bye-bye.